Martinez with you. Austin, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being here with us live in LA. We're just super stoked to be chatting with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So guys, on today's episode, we're going to be talking with Austin about unlocking the hips. Like I said, Austin joined Stretch Lab Corporation, incredible franchise, by the way, back in January 2019 as the Director of Education. Austin is a certified athletic trainer with both his bachelor's and his master's degree in athletic training. Pretty smart guy. Austin has experience primarily working with collegiate and professional athletes. He's a member of the National Athletic Trainers Association, the National Strength and Conditioning Association, the Far West Athletic Trainers Association, and he's a published author in the Journal of Sports Medicine and Allied Health Sciences for his research on ACL injuries. So Austin, thank you so much for being on the show. Super pumped to have you on today, and thanks for traveling up to chat with us in person.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here.
No doubt. So, first, before we talk about stretching, before we talk about the business of stretching and just all that we're going to jump into, I just have a question on your background. Really, what made you pursue kind of getting your bachelor and your master's degree in athletic training? What was the fire there?
Yeah, I think at its core, a big principle for me is just being able to help people. And beyond that, I have somewhat of a mind where, I kind of like this idea and this principle of kind of putting pieces of a puzzle together. And the reason for that is, looking at the work of athletic training or just, I guess, the field of sports medicine, kinesiology as a whole, a lot of our focus is really around trying to help people with whatever ailments they come to us with. And the unique thing is that every body's truly unique, right? Every body's different. You might come in with the same diagnosis or the same ailment, but the way we have to approach it is completely different based on that individual, right? And I liken it to, with every person, it becomes this really great opportunity with puzzle pieces on the floor, right? And now you're trying to put those puzzle pieces together, right? To connect those dots. And the way that puzzle outlines might be different from one person to one person. So I just really fell in love with the work and the passion and, kind of the modality as a whole. I guess the details of it, after I finished up my bachelor's degree, I was really at a crossroads, right? I think a lot of us after school, you're like, all right, I have this degree. What do I do with it? How do I want to put it in play? And at that time, I really thought for the longest time, I want to go into professional athletics. Baseball is a huge love of mine. And I thought, how great would it be to be able to watch a game for free every day?
Yeah.
So I got that opportunity when I went on to go get my master's degree. I got to work with Division I team there, got to do a stint with the Houston Astros. And it wasn't that, it just wasn't exactly what I was thinking it was going to be, and not necessarily for a bad reason. It's just the values that I had in life, it just didn't match up at that time. So as I came back, I started to continue to work more in the collegiate field. But then ultimately that led me here to Stretch Lab.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I mentioned it in our title, unlocking your hips. Like, it sounds pretty literal. Like, what does that mean to unlock your hips?
So much, right? As Shakira says, the hips don't lie. So the focus with that, you look at, I guess, modern work today, right? Ever since we've gone past the Industrial Revolution, now we're sitting at desks more of the day, right? We're not standing as much. Obviously, the standing desks are kind of helping us with that, but for the most part, we're still kind of chair-bound. And a big part of that is, I think, interlaying into just general health guidelines, right? We're not moving as much as we should be. We're not as active as much as we should be. But just from a basic standpoint, when we're seated, oftentimes our knees are a little bit higher up towards our chest. And what that does is it does two things. One, hip flexors the quadriceps, the muscles on the front side of your thigh. They're going to be more in a shortened position, right? And when you just hold that muscle in that static position like that, when it's shortened, it's going to get really tight and it's going to get really weak in that sense, right? Or it's actually going to be hypertonic, so it's going to be kind of strong. And then on the back side of that, you have your hamstring muscles. They attach into your hips as well. Now, because you're in that seated position, oftentimes we're kind of leaning forward. So to kind of counterbalance the tightness we see on the front side, we're going to have lengthened hamstrings. Those lengthened hamstrings are going to bring their own problems. Usually that's going to bring some weakness in those muscles. It's going to bring some longer elasticity with it. And each of those muscles, right, we forget that, and it goes back to kind of that fun elementary school saying the knee bone attaches to the hip bone, right? Everything all works together. I think it's really easy for us to think of like, no, my ankle's just my ankle. And so being able to work on those muscles really affects the health of your hips. And the hips at its center is really all attached to our core, right? And the movement that we do, we're bipedal human beings. We walk on our feet. So everything really establishes from those hips. no matter what activity we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many times, like in athletics, and I mean, just really in life, like, golf swings, or, in jujitsu or whatever, like people will be like, man, you got to unlock your hips. You got to move your hips. You got to get your hips firing. And I think so many times people don't really understand what the person is asking for, right? Because we don't think about our hips as like we think about our legs, and we think about our trunk, and we think about like our arms, but like, I don't really think people think about their hips in that way,
I agree. And taking your examples, right? Whether it's jujitsu, golf, baseball, really any sport or just an activity, running, walking, right? A lot of our power, a lot of our endurance, whatever that may be, comes from the hips, right? You'll hear that from any people doing those activities. So if we have restriction, right, we have tight muscles, we have maybe not as much strengthening or weakness, we're not going to derive as much power, as much mobility, as much range of motion that we need from those hips. So being able to free that up can interlay from so many things, right? Your golf swing and your performance, if you're really trying to be competitive, to just the day-to-day stuff, such as like, how well can I get in and out of my car?
Yep, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about, of course, what we can do to counterbalance, because, people are working at their desks. They're working more hours than we've ever worked. We have more hip problems, more hamstring problems, more ACL injuries, right? More things, more issues with our body than we've ever had. And I absolutely think it's a direct correlation to how much we're sitting, right? How much we're stagnant and how much we're staring at computer screens all day. So, of course, I want to jump into what you're doing now, Stretch Lab, how incredible the concept is. Me personally, I'm a consumer of Stretch Lab. I'm a member there. I go to the one back in home near Charlotte, North Carolina, in Huntersville. And I'll talk a little bit about that experience and how much I love it, and some records I've set there. Just got to throw that in. But yeah, talk to us about, of course, what people can do. Obviously, stretching is super important. But I feel like, you tell people to stretch, you show them how to stretch, and then sometimes they don't do that themselves, like me. So what are some things that people can do to really kind of counter this issue of, having locked up hips?
Yeah. Well, I think to go back on what you touched to kind of start on this conversation is really important. This concept of more, right? We want to work more. We want to run more. We want to work out more. We want to do all these things more, right? But sometimes we have to think and remember, our bodies are not necessarily robots, machines, right? Our bodies naturally need some sort of rest cycle. And so that's where I think we've really hit this crux of the ailments that we have most of the time when it comes to chronic musculoskeletal pain, things of those natures, that oftentimes we're doing more and we're not looking at, okay, well, how do I actually restore, recover, and get back to that neutral from that activity that I did, right? And I might commonly see that in kind of the workout culture, right? It's like, okay, I want to work out 6-7 times a week. Great. Well, what are you doing for recovery? Exactly. And to your point, when you go into a gym or you go into any sort of activity, it's oftentimes the thing put to the side, right? I'm going to really program my workout. I'm really going to make sure I have the time to do that. And you know what? Any extra time I have, I'm going to dedicate to stretching, right? Which ultimately doesn't happen. Yeah. Or it's relegated to the last minute of your workout where you just touch your toes for a few seconds, try to do a little bit of cool down, and it's not there. And the same instance, something that I've been really getting into is kind of endurance running. It's just helpful for me to kind of shut my brain off, challenge myself. And I'll see it there consistently where we're at the start of a race and you have people doing their stretch warm-ups and it's just a quick like, okay, let me each touch my toes and I'm going to go run for 2 hours, right? And it's like, it's just funny to see. So I agree, right? So being more intentional, right? In the same way that we're intentional with how well we eat, we're intentional with our exercise program, we're intentional with maybe the mindfulness that we want to bring into our day, the joy in our relationships, right? And how we plan that out. You really have to plan out stretching because it's not just going to happen, right? For myself, the way I do it, just to give an example, 5 minutes every day in the morning. It's just the easiest way to set it up. Right. In my morning routine, I'll wake up, I'll drink some coffee, I'll do some breath work. That's what kind of helps me from a meditation standpoint. And then I'll just do maybe 5 or 6 simple stretches in the morning. And
just to pause you real quick, what breath work do you do?
Great question. So I recently got introduced to the concept of alkaline breathing. Okay. Company out in San Diego, Carlsbad. It's called Breath. They really focus on, it's very similar to the Wim Hof method. Sure. And so it really focuses on different tempos and rhythm of breath. And that's been very helpful from me in a perspective of, it's been shown to increase your levels of norepinephrine, which kind of gives you that same sense of clarity, right? And just for myself as, who I am, it's really hard for me to shut my brain off. My brain's constantly thinking, right? I'm constantly thinking about what can I do better? What strategy can I implement? All that stuff. So if I can find something like that, I'm addicted to it.
Well, the reason I ask is I do Wim Hof and I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I don't do it every day. I wish I did, but I try to do it a couple times a week, and I need to be more deliberate about doing it daily. But same, I absolutely love it. It's just a way to focus on, one thing. It's a way to, really like oxygenate your body is really what you're doing, right? And there's so many health benefits to that, and it's completely free, right? You're literally just breathing, and you're focusing, and you're being intentional about breathing. And I'm sure we can talk about that all day, but for folks who are listening who haven't researched breath work and Wim Hof, just give it a Google. Like it's fantastic. Totally agree with you on that.
I agree. Yeah. So when I finish that up, I'll kind of do that for about 5 minutes. My brain will feel at peace, and then I'll just move through some 5 simple movements for stretches. Because I find the more you can make it bite-sized and simpler, the more likely you are to do it. 100%. We talk about this in our business at Stretch Lab, right? It's really easy to come in here and say, all right, I'm not flexible, and let me get in there and I'm going to start stretching every day for 15, 30 minutes. And that's the equivalent of the person that's, January 1st comes around, they want to lose some weight. I'm going to run 5 miles a day. Yeah. You're going to burn out, or you're going to injure yourself, right?
You're going to do it like twice, maybe.
Exactly. So, you have to take some small steps to do that. And that's what's been helpful for me, I guess, to be consistent with it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, we were talking a little bit about, this business before we kind of launched and started the podcast, but stretching as a business, like that wasn't a thing 10 years ago. Maybe not even 5 years ago, right? And Stretch Lab, for those listening who have never heard of Stretch Lab is a kind of boutique stretching environment where you walk in and there's maybe, I'm sure you can correct me, but 12 to 15-ish tables. And they have professional folks who are in there stretching you, right, on open tables. And, again, I'm a consumer, so I've been in there dozens and dozens of times. I typically go once a week for about an hour. I stretch with my man Chaz out in Huntersville. He's the man. Shout out to Chaz. If you guys are interested, check him out. He gets booked up because he's so good, but I stretch with him, and really, we do all different kinds of stretches. He stretches, it's assisted stretching, right? So he's helping to stretch my legs and my hips and my back and my arms and my shoulders. It's really incredible. I wish I could go 5 times a week. It's really so beneficial. But talk to us a little bit about this business and how it got started, I guess, and, kind of where it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Stretch Lab as a whole, right? I'll add to what you're saying. It is boutique, like you said. Generally, you'll see it in a storefront. And
you're Clean Juice.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The one that I go to in Huntersville is literally like a half a mile from the first Clean Juice that we ever opened.
Yeah, and we're strategic. We love to partner with brands like yours, right? Yeah. We're looking for other wellness opportunities so we can have similar consumers. And a lot of what we're focused on, like you said, 10 benches. You can have anywhere between 6 to 12 flexologists. And flexologist is our trademark name for essentially a stretch therapist. They'll go through 60, 80 hours of training. We do that at the corporate level because we truly believe, like, to place your hands on someone, that's a privilege, right? Especially from a public consumer standpoint. So we want to make sure that when you come in, you feel comfortable, you get the best stretch possible, you feel really confident with that. And then in addition to that, they're already going to have, it's very common to have a degree in exercise science or a certification in personal training. Yes. They're physical therapy assistants, physical therapists. So it's great. And it's all focused on one-on-one assisted stretching. The model of it itself, so it actually started not too far from where we are in Venice, California. That was the first location. It expanded to 2 more locations here in LA. And that was with the original founders. And, they had the vision and the sight to be able to bring that. The story goes that it was a personal trainer and a lawyer. And the personal trainer would always kind of do one-on-one training with the lawyer. And in the last 2 to 5 minutes of the workout, that personal trainer would just do some assisted stretches. And at a certain point, the lawyer looked at the personal trainer and said, you know what, I really enjoy the workouts you're offering, but the stretching thing's great. Like, I would love to just come in and get this. Yeah. And lo and behold, that's how the concept was born in a sense. And It was, near the year 2018 that Exponential Fitness, which is our current parent company, and we have 9 other boutique fitness brands. We purchased the rights to StretchLab and we started to franchise it.
It's awesome.
So as a whole, our biggest mission, we want to be the worldwide leader in assisted stretching because we believe that the work we do is meaningful. We help people in so many different ways. So we want to be in those communities and help the people.
I mean, it is meaningful. It's meaningful to me personally, right? It's funny. Stretching is one of those things where it's like you basically, people know how to stretch.
Yeah.
Right?
And we know we should do it.
We know we should do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we don't. Right. And so like for me personally, like, I was your quintessential, person coming in. Like I was lifting weights. I do a lot of jujitsu, but I wasn't stretching, and I know how to do it, but I mean, the stretching that they help you with there is 10 times better than what I could have ever done myself. And now, even though I only go once a week, I'm more intentional about stretching myself because I know, number one, how good it makes me feel and that, it's good for me to do. It's funny, like you can tell people until you're blue in the face that they should do something, but until they experience it themselves and experience the feeling from it, it's like, that's what hooks you, you know, that's what gets the consumer going. And I've loved every second of going into StretchLab, and I always feel better, when I leave than when I came in. And I think that's the goal of any business, right? That's our goal at Clean Juice. Like we want people to leave, in a better place than when they came in, not just because they got a great product, but because they got a great experience. And it's a very different experience, right? You guys are offering, a stretch and a service versus a product, but it's the same thing. It really is.
I agree. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're helping people live healthier, happier lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mentioned briefly a few minutes ago that I hold a record in Huntersville. We got to talk about that. Yeah. The record that I hold is for the highest MAPS score. So, for those in the StretchLab world who are going to listen to the podcast, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But for people who have never been to a StretchLab before, talk to us a little bit about what that is, what the MAPS score is, and kind of how you get people started onto their StretchLab journey.
Yeah, so it's this really great technology that's exclusive to StretchLab. We have a great relationship with the vendor. And it's a movement assessment technology. So essentially in 30 seconds, we'll have you do 3 stationary overhead squats, and we'll assess your mobility, your activation, your posture, and your symmetry, which is where that acronym comes from. So mobility as a whole, we're looking at key major joints in your body, right? All the way from your ankles up into your shoulders and your elbows. We're looking at how well you move compared to essentially normative values, right? Which is what you would see in, a fancy orthopedic textbook that says this is how well you should move in this hip joint, right? And it's either going to say you're exceeding it, or you're at the right level, or you're well below, right? The next piece, activation, really kind of plays into how well you're using your muscles as you go through that squat. So a common thing we might see is, what I can get really deep into that squat, but it maybe isn't as functional as it should be, right? Our knees are caving in, we're falling forward. So we need to work a little bit more on activating our muscles a little bit better to prevent injury down the road. Posture, that's a really big buzzword, I think, nowadays. What our posture looks like, whether it's sitting at a desk or how we're kind of favoring our movement side to side. So we're looking at that because oftentimes the activities that we do lead to more tightness and more imbalances. A good example, I used to be a baseball pitcher, and I still have some of those imbalances on my right side where I'm like, wow, I am just way tighter on this side, right? Compared to that, or even just the simplicity that we'll see sometimes of a newborn mother holds their child on the left side of their body. And they're like, man, why does my left back and my left neck and my left shoulder kill me right now? And then symmetry. So how efficiently are you using that body? So overall, we gain a composite score from that, 0 to 100, 50 is kind of being that middle point. And that gives us really what we like to call your readiness for stretch. And I'm going to use this example because I see it on your wrist, right? You think of Whoop, right? And it assesses, your readiness for the day, your training. We view it very similarly. It's kind of, in the beginning stages, what we wanted to solve for was stretching itself is so qualitative, right? I feel good, but am I getting my money's worth? Am I getting more flexibility? And that's what this really has allowed us to do. But it also helps us understand, where are you coming in at the first time? Like, where can we start you? How do we start this flexibility journey? But then as you come in on a monthly basis, we want to check in and make sure that, really the plan we put in place is progressing you. And so that's kind of the key value. And overall, what we message to everyone is, as much as, and I know you and I, right, we're competitors, so we want to get the best score.
Oh yeah.
And for everyone, right, sometimes we'll say like, you might come in and you might not get the best score. And what we usually say to that person, is everyone kind of starts at a different point on their flexibility journey,
Yep.
right? That's the fun part about Stretch Lab is you could have a 93-year-old on one bench and you could have a 35-year-old and you could have a 20 and a 50-year-old, and we're all here for different reasons,
Right.
but we can all get a benefit from assisted
Yeah.
stretching.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. And even because it's 0 to 100, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so even if somebody scores like a 20, I mean, if they score a 25 the next time, right, they are progressing.
Absolutely.
And so that's, I love what you said early. It's like, it's something different for every body, right? Like literal physically, everyone has a different body, right? And so you guys are doing stuff for different people and different things. And so, when somebody scores really high, it's like, okay, like this person, they're just at a different level, right? And so they're on their own completely different journey. And that's okay. Yeah. And what's really funny is I'm smiling because like I'm traditionally like, I wouldn't consider myself a super flexible person. I'm just really good at the thing that you guys have developed, with overhead squats. Like I'm good at overhead squats. And so, the reason of course why it's that is because you're doing a bunch of different things. You're getting, you're squatting, your arms are up. You can look at a bunch of different movements of the body. Right. So, some people might just not be good at that one particular thing, but at the same time, it's a good kind of indicator of overall, MAP score.
And if I can add to that, we tend to talk about the same correlation you'll see if someone's trying to go on maybe a weight loss journey.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe the scale's not giving you the number you want
Yeah.
and you're defeated by it, but your clothes fit a little better.
Right.
You're moving around a little better. You feel a little healthier. You're more energetic. So there's so many variables, right?
100%.
To your point, MAPS is that one where it's right in front of our face, but we hear so many stories of people saying just, I'm able to garden in the backyard, right?
Yep.
And I can get down on my knees and garden, whereas I wasn't able to do that without pain or, I was able to do my sport, right? Maybe I played in my basketball game and I didn't feel as sore.
Yeah.
So there's so many different variables to your point.
When I first started going to Stretch Lab, I was going because I would have like a sore neck or a sore shoulder, primarily from doing a lot of jujitsu.
Right.
But now I go more because I just like how I feel, when I leave. And so I think people probably start because they may have some acute pain, in different areas. But like for me, it's like now it's just like an overall part of my kind of wellness journey, right? Like I stretch, I do the different workouts, but then I also do, infrared sauna, and I try to do different things to, kind of better myself. And stretching for me, it wasn't earlier, but now it's such a huge part of my health journey. And it's one of those things, like if I don't do it for a couple weeks, like I feel it, I don't feel as good as I do when I'm stretching. And I think it's fantastic.
I think that plays well into, like we said on the way in, I've had a chance to listen to some of these earlier episodes, and I've heard you talk about just even your own health journey, right? Yeah. And the amazing thing that, the amazing work you all do at Clean Juice. And I think it's that same concept, right? Getting hooked on that feeling of how you feel when you go through that process and feeling like I can't imagine my life not feeling this way anymore because I've educated myself. I now know this is available. And I just think being able to bring in different things like that is so important.
Totally agree. Real quick, back to the MAP score. What's the best MAP score anybody's ever got?
That's a good question. So I have access to all the studios, and the problem is I'm not always able to attach it to the user. But there are some scores in there in the upper 90s. So we have like 92, 93.
Dang.
And those are people that are generally, they come from either a gymnast or a dance background. And the reason is that the two scores that are weighted the most in the MAPS technology is mobility. So how deep you can go in the squat, and then activation. So how well you are moving in that squat. Yeah. And, you look at gymnasts, right? They're flexible and they're really strong, right? Yeah. So it's just a cheat code for the MAPS machine.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was the third part of it?
So it's posture and then symmetry.
Posture and symmetry. Yeah, that's right. I think my score was like 79.
That's like 90th percentile.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. Like
really
when
good.
I did it, they were like,
yeah,
wow. Like
it's
they
really
were
good.
Super impressed.
That's impressed.
Yeah.
That's
Chaz
impressive.
was like, dude, that's better than I could do. I was like, and I think it was like one of the first times I ever did it. I was like, well, I'm never doing it again.
Yeah, exactly. I want to keep my score there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, for folks who, maybe they don't have access to a stretch lab yet. I mean, you guys have 200 locations and you're opening like 1 billion more, right? Mm-hmm. So eventually they will. But for people who don't have a stretch lab nearby, maybe they just want to do like 5 minutes of stretching in the morning, kind of like you're doing. Mm-hmm. What would be your recommendation to them?
Yeah, great question. So a couple things, right? First off, I'll start off with, some exciting things we're doing at Exponential. We've come together with this new platform called Exponential Plus. It's essentially a digital platform where you can actually interact with all 10 of our brands. Awesome. So that's Stretch Lab, Pure Barre, Rumble, Cycle Bar, all those brands. And you can actually live stream our classes. We have a beautiful production facility across the street from our headquarters, and we're filming content all the time. So it's basically getting that in-studio experience, but at home, because we recognize that now more than ever, right, people potentially want a hybrid experience or they want that option. So you can actually watch a stretch with me, or you could watch a stretch with Kelsey or Calvin, who are other instructors. And we're in our studio going through different routines, and we'll put really curated stuff together, right? We'll put together maybe a 7 days golfer guide, because golfers are really big demographics for us. And it'll focus on different aspects of the golf swing and what muscles you're using and what you can improve on from a mobility, pliability, flexibility standpoint to improve your golf game. We've done one where it's like a post-activity, right? So if you're cycling, running, rowing, whatever that may be, let's focus on some important muscles for a cool down after. So especially like we talked about earlier, right? If I haven't planned the idea of doing my stretching after my workout and just coming up with like, what do I actually do is daunting. It's already there for you, right? Plug and play. And then just general stretching, right? So it could be, here's an easy 5-minute class just to wake up the day or, de-stress from the day and focus on that. So that can be one option. Obviously, if you're not looking to do that, then I think, learning more about what your body needs. I always say that's kind of the key piece. And our bodies are really smart in the sense that it'll kind of guide you towards the direction of what you want.
Yeah.
Right. If my body's aching here, then that's what I'm generally doing. So, being able to just take time, whether you want to research stretches, there's great YouTube videos out there. There's great podcasts, great resources. Kelly Starrett, I'll give a shout out to him. In the Ready State, he does really good work. Vin Pham, who is a part of My Detox. So there's so many great influencers, I think, from social media as well, that might focus on some good stretching. But I would say get it from a credible source, because there's also just some wacky stuff going on social media as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Anywhere else where our listeners could, cue in, maybe learn more about stretching or Stretch Lab? If you guys want to give a shout out to any Instagram handles or websites or anything like that.
Yeah, we definitely have our Stretch Lab site. So it's just, Stretch Lab _ and you can get more information. We're constantly doing, different tips, different tricks. That might be at the actual Stretch Lab corporate site, or that might be at the individual studio site. Myself, I'm not too fancy on social media, to be honest. It's just myself and pictures of me and my wife.
There you go.
So you're not going to get much from me there. I like to stay private there.
Yeah.
But then also just like our Stretch Lab site as a whole, stretchlab.com.
Awesome. Yeah. Perfect. Well, Austin, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I'll wrap up with asking you this. What's your MAP score?
My MAP score, you beat me. So my most recent MAP score, which was last week, was a 67.
Listeners, there you go. You got it right there. Yeah. So your CEO here at Clean Juice has an incredible MAP score of 79. No, I'm just kidding. We're Austin and I are both very, very competitive, as we've learned just from chatting with each other over the last couple hours. So it's been awesome having you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. Stretch Lab, guys, check it out. It's fantastic. Again, I love talking about things that I consume and things that I really just think could, bring betterment to your life. So Austin's been kind enough to chat with us more about kind of unlocking the hips and, really what stretching means to him. But, seriously, I'm a huge advocate of this brand and of, really the things that they do there at Stretch Lab. So check them out. And again, Austin, thank you so much. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you for having me.